At first, I didn't want to do it. They had been asking me for about 2 years, and I finally agreed because I thought performing in front of 22,000 people would be exciting. I planned to play some new songs, but in the end, we only performed old ones. The crowd just stared at us. It was strange and awkward. This happened about 6 months after Ricky Nelson died in a plane crash in 1985. Everyone believed he was broke. His divorce had cost him $1 million, and he owed money to many people. It seemed like his children would inherit nothing but debt. Then his brother found a hidden will, and the lawyers discovered that record companies had been stealing from Ricky for decades. When the truth came out, his 4 children became millionaires. The settlement was so large that even the judge couldn't believe it. But one of his sons didn't get anything, and the reason was shocking. Ricky Nelson was born on May 8, 1940, in Tenafly, New Jersey. His father, Ozzie Nelson, was a band leader, and his mother, Harriet, was an actress. Ricky's life was public from the very start. When he was still a baby, his family's radio show, The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, became a hit across America. Instead of a normal childhood, Ricky grew up in recording studios and on sound stages. Family dinners turned into rehearsals, and vacations became part of the show. Everything in his life felt scripted. By age 8, in 1949, Ricky joined the radio show with his brother David. While most boys his age were playing outside, Ricky was memorizing lines and getting paid to act. By age 10, he was famous. But fame came with a cost. He missed out on being a normal kid. There were no birthday parties or sports, just work and responsibility. His childhood was sacrificed for the family's image. In 1941, the Nelsons moved to Los Angeles and lived in a pretty green and white house that later became famous on television. Fans would even drive by to see it. But inside, it was more of a business than a home. Ozzie ran everything like a strict manager, and the kids were part of the operation. Their real and TV lives were mixed together, blurring what was real and what wasn't. Ricky also struggled with asthma, which often kept him home from school and away from friends. He spent a lot of time indoors reading and listening to music. This made him quiet and thoughtful, traits that later made him appealing on screen. When the radio show started in 1944, Ozzie and Harriet hired actors to play their sons, but Ricky and David wanted to play themselves. By 1949, they finally did, making the show one of the first real family series. Audiences loved it, and Ricky's life became public property. In 1957, when Ricky was 17, he performed Fats Domino's I'm Walkin' on the family TV show. It was an instant hit, selling over 1 million copies and turning Ricky into a teen idol. But behind the fame, his personal life was getting messy. He loved parties, cars, and girls. On TV, he looked polite and clean-cut, but off-screen, he was rebellious. He dated several girls, including actress Marian Gaba, to whom he gave a gold ring. She thought they were serious, but he quickly moved on to other relationships, including singer Lori Collins. His parents, who also controlled his career, hated this behavior. Even though Ricky was earning about $500 a week as a teenager, his father kept most of the money and only gave him a small allowance. Ozzie didn't want him to get spoiled. He also tried to control Ricky's love life, but Ricky quietly rebelled with secret girlfriends and late-night parties. At 17, Ricky's first album Ricky hit number 1 in 1957, making him the youngest artist ever to top the Billboard LP chart at that time. With millions watching The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, his songs became instant hits. His father, Ozzie, was the mastermind behind this success. He made Ricky sing new songs at the end of each episode, which guaranteed exposure to millions of viewers. When Ricky performed I'm Walkin' on the show, it jumped straight to the top of the charts. In 1958, his song Poor Little Fool became the first ever to reach number 1 on Billboard's new Hot 100 chart, securing Ricky's place in music history. Between 1957 and 1962, he had 20 songs in the top 40, second only to Elvis Presley. His records sold millions, and by 1960, he had thousands of fan club chapters worldwide. In 1959, Ricky proved he could act too, starring in Rio Bravo with John Wayne and Dean Martin. The role earned him a Golden Globe nomination. But he also began spending money wildly, buying suits, cars, and living luxuriously. His monthly allowance was said to be $5,000, about $50,000 today. In 1961, he released Travelin' Man, which became a #1 hit and sold over 1 million copies. But as the 1960s went on, the music scene changed. The Beatles took over the charts in 1964, and Ricky's popularity began to fade. Ricky met 16-year-old Kristen Harmon on Christmas Day, 1961. He was 21, and she was the daughter of football star Tom Harmon and actress Elise Knox, and the sister of actor Mark Harmon. They looked perfect together, but their relationship was full of problems. Ricky's father still controlled his money, and Kristen wanted a glamorous lifestyle. Ricky tried to keep up, but the spending never stopped. They married on April 20, 1963, because Kristen was already pregnant, and her Catholic parents insisted on a quick wedding. Ricky, who wasn't Catholic, had to promise to raise their children in the faith. It wasn't a choice, it was something he had to do. Their life together soon turned into financial trouble and emotional strain, setting the stage for the hard years that followed. Rick had to take Catholic classes and go through all the steps just to keep the peace. The wedding was supposed to be a happy event, but behind the scenes, it was all about pressure, control, and putting on a show for the public. That pressure never really stopped. Ironically, Rick's parents loved Kristen. They had rejected all his other girlfriends, but not her. They were thrilled to connect the Nelson and Harmon families. Kristen had the perfect image, elegant, well-connected, and from a respected Hollywood family. It looked like a perfect match, but that dream faded quickly. Rick had grown up under his father's strict control when it came to money, but Kristen loved to spend. They didn't budget, they just bought whatever they wanted. When Rick's music career began to slow down in the mid-1970s, the bills didn't. Kristen wanted him home more, but he had to keep touring to earn money. He was emotionally and financially exhausted. The marriage that once looked perfect from the outside was falling apart and eventually ended with a $1 million legal bill. After their wedding, Kristen even joined Rick on the adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, playing herself on the show. But instead of helping, the extra income only fueled more spending. Neither of them saved anything. They were surrounded by managers, assistants, and accountants, but no one stopped them. Rick, who once followed his father's strict money rules, was now wasting money just to keep up appearances. Kristen, feeling trapped in a fake Hollywood world and a broken marriage, started to drift away. Their once glamorous life was turning into a slow financial collapse. In 1965, Rick and Kristen made a movie together called Love and Kisses, directed by his father. It told the story of two young newlyweds struggling to live with the groom's parents. The movie was supposed to be light and fun, but in reality, it mirrored their own troubled lives. Critics didn't realize how close it was to the truth. Rick played a high schooler even though he was 25, and Kristen's performance didn't impress anyone. Behind the scenes, their real marriage was already falling apart. Ozzie used the film to express his own frustrations, turning private family issues into a public story. It was awkward and painful to watch. By 1969, Rick wanted to leave the past behind. He formed the Stone Canyon Band and tried mixing country and rock music, ahead of its time. He hired talented young musicians, including Randy Meisner, who later joined the Eagles. The band had potential, but they struggled to make money. Rick went from playing in packed arenas to small clubs for little pay. Meisner eventually quit because he couldn't afford to stay. Rick's albums Rick Sings Nelson and In Concert were musically strong but didn't sell well. Rick wanted artistic freedom more than fame, even if it cost him everything, and it almost did. Then came the night that broke him. On October 15, 1971, Rick performed at Madison Square Garden. He expected cheers but was booed instead. He had dropped the Y from Ricky to show he was moving forward with a new sound. When he performed Honky Tonk Women, the crowd turned on him, they only wanted his old hits. Some blamed the police for trouble in the crowd, but Rick took it personally. He walked off the stage feeling humiliated. He was later persuaded to return and sing his classics, and the crowd cheered again, but the damage was done. That painful experience inspired him to write Garden Party in 1972. The song was honest and emotional, with the famous line, "You can't please everyone, so you got to please yourself." It became a hit, reaching number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100 and going gold. For a moment, Rick was back on top. But his success didn't last long. The next few singles failed, and his label didn't know how to market him anymore. By 1974, albums like Windfall flopped, and he was reduced to playing amusement parks and taking small TV roles. Eventually, MCA dropped him. Garden Party became both his big comeback and his final major hit. By the mid-1970s, Rick's life was falling apart. His marriage was breaking down, held together only for appearances. He toured non-stop to pay for their expensive lifestyle, private schools, luxury homes, endless bills. But the more he worked, the more distant he became from Kristen. She felt abandoned, and he felt trapped. Their relationship turned bitter, full of fights and resentment. In 1977, after coming home from another long tour, Rick found himself locked out of his own house. Kristen had moved all his belongings into a rental home and was inside with 2 Los Angeles Rams cheerleaders. Rick was humiliated. Kristen later claimed she did it to protect their children, blaming Rick for drug use, which his team denied. But the marriage was beyond repair. In 1980, they tried to start over. Rick bought Errol Flynn's old mansion on Mulholland Drive for $750,000, hoping for a new beginning. But instead, it added more stress. Kristen wanted him to quit music and focus on acting, but he couldn't. He was drowning in debt and needed to keep touring. Rumors spread that the house was haunted, strange noises, flickering lights, but the real horror was financial. Their divorce became ugly. Kristen accused Rick of drug abuse and being a bad father. Rick fought back, accusing her of drinking too much and neglecting the kids. The court battle dragged on for 5 years, costing over $1 million in legal fees. By 1982, it was finally over. Rick was ordered to pay $4,000 a month in child support for their 4 children, Tracy, Gunnar, Matthew, and Sam. He was emotionally drained and almost broke. To keep up with payments, Rick kept touring constantly. But the stress and exhaustion took a toll on his health and spirit. By 1985, he was desperate for a comeback. The problem was, he hated flying. Still, he didn't want to travel by bus, so he bought a used 1944 Douglas DC-3 airplane for $118,000. It had once belonged to Jerry Lee Lewis, but it was in terrible condition. The engines were unreliable, and the band often had to push it off the runway. Everyone feared that plane. On December 31, 1985, despite another delay due to engine trouble, Rick boarded the plane for a New Year's Eve show in Dallas. Mid-flight, smoke filled the cabin. The pilots could barely see and had to fly almost blind. Around 5:14 p.m., the plane crashed in a field near Dallas. Witnesses saw black smoke before it hit trees and exploded into flames. Only the 2 pilots survived. Rick, his fiancée Helen Blair, and 5 band members died instantly. He was just 45 years old. After the crash, the investigation revealed his finances were in chaos. He was deep in debt, and his estate owed about $1 million. His fiancée Helen wasn't in his will, nor were his ex-wife or mother. His brother David later found a will naming only his 4 children as heirs. Kristen challenged it in court, trying to claim part of the estate and life insurance. Then another surprise came. Rick had another son, Eric Jude, from a brief affair with a woman named Georgianne Crew. A court test in 1981 had proven paternity, but Rick later stopped paying child support. In his will, he excluded Eric entirely, claiming the paternity was disputed. After Rick's death, lawsuits poured in, from creditors, ex-partners, and even the families of the crash victims. But the real hidden wealth wasn't in his bank account, it was in his music. His catalog and royalties were worth millions, though record companies had been underpaying him for decades. In 2011, the Nelson estate sued Capitol Records for $100 to $250 million, accusing the label of hiding money and using outdated accounting tricks to steal royalties. The case settled in 2014, with Capitol paying a large, undisclosed amount and promising more transparency. Then in 2020, the estate sued Sony Music for cheating them on international streaming royalties. That case ended with a $12.7 million settlement and a 36% increase in royalties. At last, Rick Nelson's children began to receive the fortune their father had earned, a legacy built through talent, struggle, heartbreak, and decades of hidden injustice.